Good morning, Revolution. Welcome to our weekly live broadcast. Every Friday morning we're here, and today we're here with Ethan, Taryn, and Scott. And we have a really important topic today about mobilization. But first, before we start, I just want to express our solidarity with the people of New Orleans who have experienced this horrific act of violence. Really a terrible thing to start their year with. And I know there's a terrible loss of life and also the trauma that's going to be with these the survivors and their families for years to come. So we just want to express our solidarity and underscore that violence like that is never an effective tool in our toolkit. We know that the forces of the fascist forces are really trying to foment disorder and fear of crime among our people, which will make a fascist takeover even easier or smoother. So we have to really fight against that and not give into that kind of fear. So we really want to what we want to talk about today is why even bother resisting? There seems to be a media narrative about the lack of resistance to the second Trump administration, and we're really gearing up for our protest on January 18th in Washington, D.C. So we're really responding to the question of why even bother building these big national protests. And let's start with you, Ethan. Do you think are demonstrations like this nowadays effective? They didn't seem, some people are saying they weren't very effective in the past, but what do you think about the effectiveness? Are mass demonstrations like this still a tactic that you find compelling?
Yeah, there's plenty of evidence to show that, fighting back using a variety of tactics, is extremely important. Here in the People's Movement, we have to rely on the resources we have. We can't file multi-million dollar, multi-year effort lawsuits, with the resources we have. But what we do have is the ability to mobilize people as one of our many tactics to negotiate directly with our leaders. This isn't the be-all, end-all, and we've seen, over the past 15 plus years of mass mobilizations and street demonstrations, that this isn't a tactic that belongs exclusively to the left or leads to linear progress, but it is an important tactic nonetheless. And when we do it right, we can build the capillaries, the organizational capacity to organize in different ways beyond just mobilization. But we've seen, in recent years, and we're seeing today, what mass mobilization can do. In the instance of South Korea, literally defeated a quasi-fascist military coup, and that's an ongoing issue. And you have to build the organizational capacity to fight these legally, legislatively, electorally, within mass strikes. But just mobilization is enough to make people empowered rethink what they're doing, to make coalitions of those in power kind of crack under the weight of public perception. We've also seen the people of France negotiate directly with their government over the retirement system through mass mobilization, where only 10% of the workforce is in organized labor unions. And, we have general strikes and other strikes throughout France, which requires a little bit more of that capillary organizational capacity. But it's the mass mobilization of the French public that has pushed back against neoliberal agendas in austerity and privatization. And we see this across Latin America in the resurgent labor movement, where labor laws aren't the same when it comes to collective bargaining that we have here in the United States. And frequently our friends in Brazil and Mexico and Colombia have to rely on mass mobilization of the general working class to be able to begin to negotiate for higher wages, better benefits, anything like that, before management's willing read their proposals. So we see this as part of a plethora of tactics that is integral, and it comes and speaks directly to social movements and organized labor and progressive organizations like our own. That the resources that we do have, we have the people, we can mobilize, and we can affect real meaningful change. And that we see that across the world. There are pitfalls, but it is a tactic we cannot abandon.
Thanks, Ethan. Yes, you're absolutely really good points. And one of the concepts you mentioned there is organizational capacity, which reminded me of the Women's March, which is the organizing organization behind this January 18th demonstration, which they have renamed the People's March. And they say that, Scott, they say that one of its purposes are to move people into permanent political homes, just to increase the number of people who are in the movement. So, Scott, could you speak to? I think this really speaks to our concept of popular front. Could you talk about that breadth of mobilization for this demonstration in particular?
Yeah, sure. So there's an incredible array of groups representing um, uh, racial justice, economic justice, women's rights, um, just an incredible array of organizations involved in this thing. And the idea is that we all have some skin in this game. The working class does, obviously, because we've seen, the attack that the fascists have both historically and presently leveled against the working class. Obviously, women, this is an incredibly uh, intense and dangerous moment for the women's movement, given the way that the fascist forces are trying to reimpose patriarchal models of family and control over women and their bodies and their lives. Also for people of color, for immigrants, for the environmental movement. Like we all have a stake in this, so we all need to turn out, and that's the basis of the Popular Front. We don't agree on a lot of things, right? We're going to be marching alongside people who might not agree with us on Cuba or on Palestine or on the overthrow of capitalism. Um, uh, but we're not marching. The purpose of this march and the demand of this moment right now is not to overthrow capitalism on January 18th. It's to do everything we can to stop the Trump administration from carrying out the fascist coup that they give every evidence of planning. Um, so that organizational capacity is really important. Moving people into, we have a lot of people who have been pushed out of political work broadly, right? How many people have you heard say, oh, I don't know, I'm not political, I don't get involved with all that stuff, I don't know, I vote, but I don't know about, right? Part of what is happening is people are being called into a mass popular movement for democracy and for social progress. And everything we can do to help that along is urgently necessary.
Thanks, Scott. You're absolutely right. And with so many people with a stake in this fight, why then, Taryn, do we have this media narrative that I mentioned earlier of demobilization and demoralization? And who do you think is pushing that narrative, and why? People are saying, well, popular uprisings like this, they backfire, and they're really trying to discourage people from getting out. Even some people who claim to be from feminist organizations or other left-leaning organizations claim that this is true. Who's really behind that narrative of demoralization, and what do you think about that, Taryn?
Well, I mean, as we can see with the media coverage already kind of rolling over for another Trump administration, it's pretty obvious who's behind this narrative of don't bother to resist. It's obviously the bourgeoisie. They know just as we in the Communist Party know that in 17 days, the world is going to change and it is not going to be very nice. And so they would obviously prefer that people shut up, go home, hide under their beds, snitch on their neighbors, do whatever they can, turn on television, instead of do what it was that we did the first time that Trump was president, which was get in the streets every single day that we could possibly get in the streets. Because I don't know if folks who are watching remember what the first 100 days of the first Trump administration were like, but they were pretty brutal. And so there were many different reasons to get into the streets. And even though you might say, well, it's not going to get Trump out of office, or it's not going to, maybe it's not going to stop everything that we want, to kind of to Scott's point, like it's not like we're out there demanding an end of capitalism, although we are. But it's important for us to send a message that even if the bourgeoisie, even if the capitalists, even if the bosses, even if the media billionaires who now own like almost 100% of our media are going to roll over for another Trump administration, we, the people, are absolutely not going to do that. The working class is not going to do that. People who are oppressed are not going to do that. We will be out there every single day fighting in the streets, as well as at the ballot box, as well as sending in postcards. I mean, every single thing that we do and don't do right now is very, very important as to how things will proceed under the Trump administration. We can already see what happened when people didn't bother to show up and vote in perhaps what they considered to be safe blue states, right? We've seen that means that Trump has gotten a very slim portion of the popular vote, even though he didn't get more than 50%. And we should remember that. We weren't able to sort of blow it out of the water in a way that would have given us more leverage, right? So that was what people didn't do. If people do not show up in the streets now to protest against what Trump is going to be doing to us, then that will also have an impact, right? So there's really no harm in going out and protesting against the Trump agenda, against the Project 2025 agenda. In fact, if we don't do that, then I would say that we are somewhat suicidal at that point. It's a good way of getting organized, as others have mentioned. It's a good way of sending a message. It's also a good way of looking around and seeing that you are not the only one who feels this way. The more that people come out and they see that others feel the same way that they do, the more that people come out and see that others are in motion and getting organized, the more they themselves will get in motion and also get organized. It is not a panacea. It is not something that is going to fix everything, but it is a necessary component, especially at this stage of struggle, to show up in the streets in a mass way. All forms of mass resistance are good and should be encouraged, from sending postcards and making phone calls to your senators and your congress people and your city council people, but also showing up in the streets when and wherever we can.
Thanks, Taryn, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the crucial demographics for showing up to demonstrations like this are young people. And young people, like you said, Taryn, didn't come out and vote. I think instead of a 52% turnout, it was more like in the low 40s this time. Ethan, what can we do to really get youth engaged in this particular? We have just about 17 days or 16 days to build this demonstration that we're having on the 18th, the People's March. How would you suggest that they would most effectively reach young people and show them the importance of coming out right now in this particular time period of the inaugural weekend?
Yeah, I think talking directly to young people about the diversity of the working class, and showing that we all have a place in this movement, people of color, women, LGBT people, we're all on the same side. I know there's a lot of derision around identity politics as being something that lost, the election, but it's the Democratic Party, or the neoliberal failure overall, to address the basic needs facing people, which most working class people, or most people within the identities I just mentioned are working class. So showing demonstrations that build in all of these components that talk about the future, especially if we talk about the environmental impacts that a drill baby drill administration is going to have on young people. These are the issues that face young people. And I think, this broad mobilization, articulating a different vision and a different future of society that incorporates enhancing the rights of the oppressed, but also addressing the real fundamental economic and environmental insecurity that young people face is integral and speaks directly to them. And I think we have to have this broad coalition. That's what it's going to take to win and to fight off the policies that are going to hurt people. And I think it's extremely important to articulate this vision and to not drop off, the economic, but also the social and environmental demands of young people.
Thanks. Yeah, Lowell Denny just commented that silence is death. We cannot be silent, and I agree with that. Scott, what about the CPUSA in particular? Why is it important for us at this point to show we're building a very sizable contingent of people from as far away as Oklahoma and Ohio and Massachusetts? We're all converging on DC on January 18th. And what's the role of the Communist Party in particular, do you think, in showing up to these kind of demonstrations, Scott?
Well, I think it has to do with our conception of socialism and the fight for it. And speaking of, January 1st this year was the 66th anniversary of the Cuban Revolution, and which was a process, and the continuing socialist construction in Cuba is a process of mass mobilization of the people in all kinds of ways in building a new society. And that's what we're about. So that work is beginning here. We're not as far along as the Cuban people are, obviously, but bringing people out, getting people involved, meeting people where they are and helping them take that next step forward on a mass basis, that's what is going to move us along the path to socialism. I know, there's a lot of what we call sectarian kinds of thinking around this. That is to say, approaches that emphasize, a smaller group with the most advanced demands, right? That what communists should do is just demand socialism now and condemn everything that is not immediately aligned with our vision. That's not how we go about it. We work where the masses of people are, and we, like Lenin said, we try to raise people up, right? Help people to take the next step forward in this process of popular liberation and democracy that is the struggle for socialism. And that's why I think we have such an important role there. And I'm really glad that we're organizing for a big turnout.
Thanks, me too. I think it's going to be really exciting. Taryn, one thing that you and I are representing women on this particular panel, and some conservative Democrats even are saying, well, the Harris campaign they stressed women's issues too much and too much focus on the women's issues and not issues relating to the working class. Could you speak to that idea that is seems to be going around these days? And I mean, I think the Women's March wants to broaden it out, but still, it's the Women's March that is really the force behind organizing this. Could you talk a little bit about women and this struggle against fascism?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if people don't think that that women's issues are not working class issues, then they need to get it together, because more than half of our working class are women. And so if women are experiencing, mass death because they are not having access to reproductive care, then that is an issue that affects more than 50% of the working class. And so I cannot get my head around why people would think that this is an appropriate time to speculate as to whether or not we would ever have a woman president. when you have Black and brown women who are dying of sepsis in emergency rooms all across the South, where their deaths are not even being recorded as a result of the overturning of the Dobbs decision. Not the overturning of the Dobbs decision, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. There is no excuse for this country to be experiencing the spike in maternal mortality that it is right now. And if you cannot see that as being a working class issue, then you are going to lose the working class. I think that part of the reason why women were not coming out to vote in their best interests as much as they might have otherwise been is because actually a lot of the liberal Democrats felt like they needed to soft pedal the idea that there was this sort of absolute catastrophe that was happening to women in this country with the removal of our rights. Like, this is literally the worst thing that has happened to women in this country in my lifetime, in Anita's lifetime, I would say in many comrades' lifetime. This is a terrible, terrible thing that has set us back, not just physically, but socially. I was reading an article the other day about how the reason why certain I guess it's like college admissions or applications of men are going down is because there are more and more women that are going into academia, and that this sort of correlates with a general attack on academia, that this correlates with a removal of resources from public education, right? As seeing it as a sort of feminized space, literacy as a feminized space. This is related to the fact that we're getting our rights stripped from us. And so when you have these freaks come out and say that they want to repeal the 19th Amendment, which is the amendment that allows women to vote in this country, when you have people who are eating dinner with the president of the United States or incoming president of the United States saying that it would be a good idea to disenfranchise more than half of the working class, how do you not see that as a working class issue, right? We are for the franchise. We are for maximizing rights, and we should be very mindful of making sure that we're including more than half of the working class in that equation and taking those issues that women and trans people have, because those two issues are extremely interlinked. And there was a wedge shoved between cis women and trans women or transgender people in general during this last election cycle around that. You also need to understand, and it's possibly our job as communists to explain to people, that these issues are deeply working class issues, that we are advocates for the working class. And so that means that we have to come out proudly as working women, right, to fight for our rights, and that we need all of the working class to get behind us on this. Otherwise, we are not going to have the kind of unity that we need in order to defeat the Trump agenda.
Exactly. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Ethan, I know it's not easy to get to Washington D.C. for quite a few people. What if you live in Oregon or Texas or someplace like that, California, and you're not able to travel to Washington D.C.? What would you advise comrades to do in those situations if you're not able to attend the January 18th march?
Yeah, I would pursue the funding resources that are there with coalition partners alongside the CPUSA, see what's available to get you this way. But if it's totally unfeasible, those same coalition partners, I'm sure, are hosting rallies and demonstrations in major cities, if not capitals of states, all across the country. So looking into the Poor People's Campaign or the ACLU or Planned Parenthood, these broad popular organizations that reach millions of people across the country, what are they asking their constituents to do? So joining, mobilizing, getting out there with AFL-CIO, and showing the tour de force in your own states, particularly in red states across the Midwest and the South. Anyone considering additional anti-women, additional anti-worker legislation, we need to have you at your state capitals saying, we will, we might not have the money to fight your legislation, but we will create a media circus. We will, fight you, and we will, in terms of your reelection, and we will make this difficult for you. So showing that power, it's important to show it federally, like we're all mobilizing for this one event, but it's extremely, extremely important to organize in your own location, in your own region, because that's where we're seeing the, like Taryn just outlined, the horrific repercussions of repealing Roe v. Wade and the enactment of these abortion bans and across the U.S. South, and the real implications that has for children and women across the country. And we need you to mobilize and put the fight back in your home regions. So get involved wherever you can. It's not, the be all end all is not one mobilization to Washington, even though we do hope everybody who can make it. But we do need you to be involved locally to push these fights where it really matters, where women and newborns are dying at exponential rates across the U.S. South. So yes, please get organized where and however you can.
Thank you, Ethan. Yes, and the People's March organizers have made it relatively easy. If you go to peoplesmarch.com and scroll down, you'll find two buttons. One that says find a local march, which you can find local marches, and those are marches that are taking place on January 18th, the Saturday of inauguration weekend. What we expect people will be doing on January 20th, Inauguration Day, will be, first of all, recognizing Martin Luther King Day in the morning, maybe going to a Martin Luther King Day breakfast, and having a day of reflection, given that that's Inauguration Day. There's also an event in Washington organized by the National Action Network that morning by Reverend Al Sharpton in Washington, D.C., which our comrades will be attending, but in way lower numbers, of course, because we don't want to be too much on the ground in Washington, D.C. on Monday. But some demonstrations are, there's some demonstrations taking place on Monday in different cities that are maybe sectarian or demanding, different kinds of demonstration than we would be behind. Scott, do you have any word on how would you celebrate, or how would you suggest to people that they reckon with these multiple demonstrations in different places?
I'd say, well, I can give you the example of what my club did. We're organizing ourselves to get as many members of the club as possible to DC. My club's in Ithaca, New York, so upstate New York. It's probably a 5+ hour drive to DC. But for people that can't do that, there's a march being planned in Syracuse, which is about a little less than an hour away. So if people can't come to DC, we're encouraging them to turn out there. And for, as you said, for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the best place to go really is the African American church. If there are Black churches in your area, and there almost certainly are, give them a ring, ask them, if they're organizing something, and if they welcome participation. So yeah, I think there's plenty of stuff to do. This is really, there's a place for everyone in this thing.
Exactly. And that button that you can push that says host a solidarity march on peoplesmarch.com will give you some good ideas of, even if it's like a handful of people at City Hall in your town, expressing your concern about our democratic rights, our reproductive rights, our freedoms going forward. I think that's very effective. Maybe, a handful of people alongside a busy street is a demonstration, and an important one. And I think it's very good that people have mentioned the state capitals, because one of Stacey Abrams had a nice podcast where she was talking about how one of the ways that the Trump administration wants to divide the country, and has divided the country in its first iteration, is by devolving everything onto the states. So what's going on in your state capital is very important, and it also means people's rights and privileges are different from state to state, which does not make any sense in our country. So let's close out with one last question with Taryn. I'll pose this to you. Why are you marching this January 18th? What are the standout? Maybe I should ask everybody this question. What are your standout issues? What is the one thing that you want to influence the Trump administration from enacting Project 2025? What issue is the first one that you'd like to hold the banner for? Taryn?
Well,
Go
geez,
first.
I'm marching because I'm an anti-fascist and I'm a communist, and it is absolutely my duty and obligation to do whatever I can to stop what it is that's coming. I don't think that I'm going out and holding up a banner for any one issue. The only banner that I'm holding up for any one issue is getting the working class mobilized and organized, is to just show people that it is possible to push back against what is coming. Because once people think that it's not possible to fight against what's coming, that's when people stop fighting, and that's when everything gets worse. And so that's why I'm marching. I'm not a huge fan of actually going out in January weather in DC. I've protested inaugurations before in DC. It's very cold, although who knows with global warming this year what the weather will be like. But it's my duty, it's my obligation. It's once every 4 years, and it's also something that's necessary to push the struggle forward. That's why I'm marching, is just basically because I'm an anti-fascist and I have to fight against a fascist agenda that's coming down the pipe. So
Exactly. Great. Well, our party will have a banner that says "Stop Trump's neo-fascist agenda or plan," and I think I hope that you can be there to hold that banner up, and many others. But let me get to let the other panelists have their word too. Ethan, what's the one? Is there one issue, or uh, are you going along with Taryn and just being more generalist against fascist agenda?
And I think Terrence said it best. I mean, it's really, really hard. I mean, that commitment as communist and anti-fascist, I think Terrence exactly right on that. I will say I am particularly concerned for our immigrant brothers and sisters, and I think it's important that we continue to humanize and fight back any type of scapegoating that can lead to more misery, more violence. So that's particularly what I'm concerned about going into this January in the new year.
Thanks, Ethan. And I see even San Diego, California, is going to have a contingent in DC. So it's going to be a large one. So Scott, we'll let you have the last word. Is there one issue that you're really focusing on going into this January 18th demonstration?
I think Taryn really hit it on the head. Like the banner we're carrying is a banner that represents the interests of all workers and all oppressed people in the fight against fascism. And it's the banner of a new kind of politics, or maybe an old kind of politics that the working class and people of the United States are remembering and coming back to, right? So there's this, in all of these editorials that we've seen disparaging protest, there's this tendency to counterpose protest and election, right? Oh, don't go out and do the protest thing. Just focus on winning elections. That's wrong, and it's a trap, and it's a ruling class message, right? We know that no section of the ruling class is willing to concede the political initiative to the people. Their interest, even the most democratic section of the ruling class, is for a very limited democracy, a democracy where the rich can do whatever they want, and maybe the rest of us have, some small role in it. We're out there for a different kind of politics, one that says that the power is with the people, the power is with the mass movement, and protest and elections are two expressions of the same kind of power, the same kind of mobilization, the same kind of uprising for a better world.
Wow, thank you so much. That's really this panel has really, I think, inspired a lot of us to to get out there and just show our commitment to the struggle going forward. And we're not afraid of this administration. We're going to fight this every step of the way. So keep up the fight. And again, that's peoplesmarch.com. That's a very helpful website with hints about how to get to DC and what to do when you get there. There's going to be kickoff rallies from different sites in around the perimeter of the rally from 10 o'clock until noon, and then they're going to have a march, and then they're going to have a rally in place from 1 to 3. And at that time, people will be invited to connect with other groups. So they're being very intentional about building the movement and growing the movement. So I would really recommend go to peoplesmarch.com and make your plans to go to DC, or make your plans for your own event in your own city, or to join an event in your city. And that's it for our Good Morning Revolution for today. We're here every Friday morning at 10:30, or you can see us on our YouTube page. And Good Morning Revolution, I just wanted to remind you, is a title of a poem from Langston Hughes. And there's a lovely video on our YouTube page right now about the 105th anniversary of the CPUSA. That part of that video is a wonderful recitation of Langston Hughes' poem, Good Morning Revolution. So if you'd like to hear the whole poem, I would say tune into that lovely video, which was put together by some comrades in Connecticut. So until next week, stay strong, stay in the fight, organize your January, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.